Welcome everyone to this morning's, let me put it in presentation mode, social system mapping deep dive session for January 18th, 2021. Your hosts today are me, Christine Capper, co-founder of sumApp and Greater Than the Sum, and Tim Hansen is with us, who's the other co-founder of Greater Than the Sum. Tim, I don't know if you, I can't see you on my screen, but if you're, some people can see you, you could wave enthusiastically. No, I'm teasing. And Kara, so Tim, Kara, and Tim, and Kara are your hosts. And Kara is for today, she's our tech support. She's also always in Slack and willing and able and happy to answer questions. So when you get stuck technically or with some app account issues or whatever it is, feel free to at her as you're posting your questions in whatever channel. She's happy to be helpful there as well. Okay. And then for those of you who are new, this is we have a cycle of 3 monthly sessions of community practice, different kinds of community practice sessions. The first one is always on the second Monday. It's an on-ramp, and that's an introductory level for people who have never seen a social system map or who really have some fundamental basic questions. And it's a really great place to get started. But it's also a really great place, like most of us who are doing this kind of mapping actually show up to see each other's maps so we can learn from what one another's been grappling with. And this coming February 8th, we had someone else set up, but she had to cancel. So I'm going to share our community practice map or the one in, February 8th, the first one next month. Today's session is our deep dive, what we call our deep dive conversation, which happens on the third Monday of every month. And we're going to try a new format, a new approach today with Christy and Sonia of Local Concepts, which is what we're calling a clinic, where someone who is just getting started with a project or has a problem, a challenge that they're struggling with a project, they present that to the group, and we all dig in and help them think about it. So we're trying this new format out today. I'm a little anxious and a little excited about it, and so we'll see how it goes. And then on the fourth Monday of every month, we have what we call a tech talk, which is when we really pay more attention to the actual technology of social system mapping. So we share a new feature of sumApp, or maybe a feature that we think no one's using and they ought to know about, or some tips in Kumu. This coming next Monday, Tech Talk on the 25th, we're going to talk about, we're in the middle of updating the survey language that for the survey part, the members data input part of sumApp. We're updating that so that we have more, because it's in a really old language, but that adds new functionality. We're not probably going to be done with it by the 25th, but we have another, the testing platform. I'm going to share some of the highlights of what that new survey will mean for us, which we're really excited about. So this is sort of where you are right now in the stream of events that we do every month, and you're welcome to join us for all of them. And that's it. Also, so those are our collective learning and community building places. We also have a number of places where you can learn more about social system mapping or sumApp or Kumu. One of which is to be on our social system community practice map, which is the one I'm going to share next month, so that if you've not even gone through a sumApp interface as a member, you can get a firsthand experience. That's also a place to engage with to learn more about the people in our community, and to also pull code from that map for your own maps and see it as an example of mapping. And I just realized I should have, wow, sorry, turned a bunch of stuff off, which I'm doing now. So we also have a Slack team. So Kara's putting the links into the chat right now. The Slack is the best way to get quick answers. And There's something else I was going to say about that. So she's also put a link to the community practice map. If you want to get on that, you can click on that link in the chat. She'll also, the other thing I was going to say was, if you don't want to be clicking on links right now and dealing with stuff, Kara is going to also include all these links in a follow-up email tomorrow. So don't worry about acting on them right now. But if you're anxious to act on them right now, they're there. And then we also have a knowledge base that has a whole lot of articles about social system mapping, sumApp, et cetera. So you can, she also put a link to that in the chat. And then lastly, we record these sessions and there's a whole history of them in the knowledge base as well. So there's a link to that if you want to go back to previous sessions, especially ones that are, you know, showing how to do some things, some technical things that we haven't actually documented yet. So that's the best place to get at those. And then lastly, for our both community building and learning needs, since everybody learns differently and it's a big, there's a lot going on. I have, I once a week, I spend a half an hour online in a Zoom link. And anybody who has a question or just wants to talk can just jump on and chat with me. And that's on Thursdays from 5 to 5:30 p.m. Central. So you're just invited to join me there. Kara, we always have the link to that in the announcements in Slack. And I also, if I have to cancel, which happens upon occasion, I'll cancel there. Okay, so let's do quick intros. Hi, Jim. I see you just joined us. And if, oh, and Laura too, cool. Yay. I was hoping you guys would show up because we're gonna want your input in a little bit, as well as some of your technical skills to lean on. Okay, so let's go ahead and in the chat, just put in, start with your name, pronoun, and location. I'm gonna stop sharing actually so that I can see the gallery better and we can all see the gallery better. And let's just have you go in and put name. Okay, Jim will come back. But so your name, location, pronoun, name, pronoun, location in the chat. And Sonia is one of our map clinic E's today. That's great. Maryland. Oh, hi, Stephanie. See you showed up. And Annie. Hi. In England, in Colombia, Virginia, Germany, Oregon. I'm always so thrilled to see people from all over the world. Edinburgh, Scotland. Cool. Okay. If you're done with that, I think there's a few more, but I'll go ahead and, so then just one thing that you're hoping to take away from this session today. And Akiko's in Sweden. Oh, Sarah jumped in. Yay. I thought you weren't going to make it. Okay. Other things anyone is hoping to take away? Good. Yeah. Just knowing everybody more is what I get most out of the whole. Okay, so I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. And so for today's agenda, I'm going to, like I said, this is a new process, a new format. And of course, I'm going to try some new technical processes to support that format. And haven't done it this way before. So I'm going to sort of lean on Jim a little bit and Kara a little bit. And hope that we can make this work. I think it's going to be good. But so I'm going to talk about that process for a minute before we jump in. Once we've got our technical selves oriented, Christy and Sonia are going to present their the purpose and the context and the challenges of what they're working on right now with their map. That'll take 10, 15 minutes. And then we're going to go into this technical tool that I'm referring to, and generate questions in what's called Team Retro. Now, I don't want you to worry about Team Retro if you're if it's just not your thing to, in the middle of a session, jump into a new tool and figure out how to navigate in it. You don't have to. I will share my screen so you'll be able to see what's going on. And as we get to the question generating, the official question generating part, I'm going to ask Jim and Kara and anybody else who's in there to help put your questions into Team Retro. So we're going to spend about 5 minutes thinking about what questions do we have, and we're not going to talk about them. We're just going to put them in there. And then Christy and Sonia will choose the topics to dig into, which ones feel the most generative for them, and then we'll dig in and have that conversation. And then for those of you who haven't been with us, the formal session is designed to last for an hour, so we'll stop at the top of the hour. But I always stick around, and Kara always sticks around, and others often do too, to just continue the conversation. So if you have more questions or you just want to keep the conversation going for an extra half an hour, we'll be here. So we'll stop at the top and have a formal goodbye to everybody who's leaving us, and then we'll proceed. So that's sort of the outline. So the process, and now I'm going to, well, let's do this. The process is that, let's do this. I'm going to stop sharing. Well, no, I'll stop sharing in a second. Sorry. Anybody who's willing and able to play techie and willing, it requires a brief giving them an email address. There's no password needed. I mean, you don't have to set up a password and remember it, but if you could go to that website, tsmna.teamretro.com/join, and input your code. The input code for everyone is 111 AC8 8C5. I'll stop talking so that you can do that. And I'm actually going to stop sharing for a minute so I can see if you're in there. And I'm going to ask Christy and Sonia actually not to look at it at first so that as you're seeing the questions coming in, you're not just automatically inclined to just start answering them as part of your presentation. I want you to just present what you want to present, and then we'll and not be influenced by those questions yet. So who's going in there and having success? If you could just do the reactions. There's at the bottom of your Zoom dashboard, there's a little smiley face that says reactions under it. If you go in there and just put a thumbs up, if you're in there. And I see, okay, Annie's in there, great. Jim is in there, thank you. Laura, yay. Okay, I'm seeing other faces looking like they're concentrating on accomplishing this task. So I'm assuming more of you are going to get in there, but I think we have enough. So what I'm going to do is let me, hang on, I'm going to go to that. Oops. So this, for those of you who are not getting in there, okay, so we can see your names on the side, so that's great. So for those of you who are not getting into, can everybody see my screen? I think, okay, thank you, Mary. For those of you who are not going to go into Team Retro, I'm going to share my screen, and you just go ahead and we'll just sit here and not worry about. Well, we'll share we'll have Sonia and Christy will present in a moment. But for those of you who are in Team Retro and are comfortable with two windows, I welcome you to, as you're listening to Sonia and Christy present, to just questions that come up to you at the time, you can feel free to start putting them into these little cards. Let's see if you all, like maybe just somebody do one, or a couple just put in something like test question or something. So I can see that it's working, and you can see how, okay, I can see Laura's telling me Laura's typing. It's telling me Annie's typing. Oh, this is cool. Tim is typing, Jim is typing. Okay, good. Yay. So feel free to put questions that arise to you in these cards now. And then when they stop, we're going to take a 5-minute break, a 5 minutes quiet time, and you guys will put your questions in, and everyone else will put their questions in the chat. And if that's a challenge, they can say them out loud, but we're just going to take 5 minutes to input questions, and then we'll cluster them, and then they'll make their decisions. So at that, I think those of you who are in there, that's great. Thank you so much. And so Kara, don't worry about it. If yeah. Oh, wait. I can't read that. If you can't get in there, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. So I'm going to hand it over now to, let me do one last thing. Okay, so we've got our process hopefully set up, and I'm going to hand it over to Sonia Keiner and Christy Gabbard of Local Concepts, who are working on a cool project. And I'm just going to stop talking myself, and you guys can tell us more. So.
Dean, thank you very much. And yeah, Sonia's here with me. Sonia, just maybe wave. I'm going to give the overview, and then we'll work on the questions together. And Sonia's just going to weigh in as I leave stuff out, or if it feels like there needs some clarification. But before I get started, I really do want to thank you, Christine, so much for hosting these, and Kara for hosting these. I personally get a lot out of all of the different communities of practice meetings that are offered throughout the months. And I've also gotten a lot out of one-on-one conversations with Christine. Very much appreciate, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to be here with you all today. So a quick overview. Sonia and I last January started with a new client, and they are leaders in a work group that spans multiple states. So they're leaders of a work group that, and participants in this work group span multiple states. And their vision was that all students in this multi-state region graduate environmentally literate. And they knew that there were a lot of people operating across these multiple states, both formal educators, those that are K-12 in the school system, and non-formal educators, those that operate through nonprofits, through state parks, through agencies. They knew that there's a lot of work happening to address environmental literacy from the formal educator perspective and also from the non-formal educator perspective, but they didn't have a good sense of what that looked like, exactly who was out there doing what sort of skills they offered, what skills they needed. And they also didn't understand what those formal educators and non-formal educators needed to advance environmental literacy so that all students graduate environmentally literate. And so we were brought on to do a landscape assessment to determine what the current conditions were like for environmental literacy across this multi-state region, and what was needed to help advance it. And this leadership group had this theory that a network was needed to advance environmental literacy. They didn't know if it needed to happen at kind of a local level, a state level, a multi-state level. So there was just a lot of questions, but they thought perhaps a network would help. And they also thought that there may already be some networks on the ground currently. So there are these questions. We came in to do this landscape assessment, which consisted of a series of interviews, some focus groups, and a network map. So we've got the interviews down, like we know how to do that. We know how to do the focus groups. And it was the network map that in the proposal, we were like, we've done a little network mapping, but no means are we experts in this space. And now all the to develop a network map, and we are going, holy crap, there's a lot of information. Can you guys hear me? I just got a notice that was unstable.
Christy, it's sometimes really slowing down. Maybe if you stop your video while you're talking, then we'll hear you better.
Okay.
Okay.
Hey, what did you hear clearly last?
Holy crap.
Holy crap. We got to do a network map. And so at any rate, what we had done thus far is in these interviews, we leaned on our leadership group to identify who to interview. And then we asked questions about what, where they were experiencing success with environmental literacy, what sort of skills they needed, what skills they had, and whether or not a network would be useful. So we did these interviews, and then we held these focus groups where we dug in deeper because we determined from the interviews that people thought a network would be information about skills and assets. And so we hosted the groups to determine whether or not at a more detailed level, what a network might provide and at what scale it would be most useful. And then we started to work on the network map. And so you can imagine during these interviews that we were asking people who they on a regular basis to get resources, who is missing from their network already, who they think should be brought in. So we had all this information about people and about organizations, and we had it for different states, and we had it for different localities, school districts. And we started to think about, okay, how are we going to show all this on a network map and have it help us develop recommendations to our client about how to move forward with environmental literacy, again, with this goal of every student graduating environmentally literate. And we started to map everything. We put all the people in there, all the organizations in there. We're thinking about all the skills that people said they had. We looked at the sumApp survey and thought about how cool it would be to give this out to more people and collect what skills they need and what skills they have to offer. And then when we were looking at this data, we were going, gosh, this really doesn't seem that helpful. It seemed like when I looked at it, it seemed like a lot of spaghetti thrown up against the paper and or the screen in this case. So we went back and we said, what do we need to do so that we are creating a map that's going to be useful in this process? And in between, we had many conversations with Christine and others. And what we decided was we had developed sort of a network map purpose statement with our clients where they wanted to use the map to visualize the existing ecosystem of the environmental education movement in the region. They wanted to use it to build capacity for the movement, including building a network mindset, bolstering existing networks, and encouraging new networks. They also wanted to provide a directory of technical and relationship support providers, and they wanted it to serve as a benchmark to assess network growth and health over time. And all of this sounded really great, but we just realized that we were sort of drowning in data and we couldn't kind of see our way through it. So we decided that we would take a phased approach to this. That these four purpose statements were great, but that we couldn't kind of do that all at once, and we needed to chunk it into smaller segments. And so we decided that we needed to really hone in on what the purpose was for our first phase so that we could best develop recommendations. And we decided that instead of creating this map, which maybe seemed based on the purpose statements that it would be useful for us as network designers, for the leadership group, and then potentially other stakeholders, that we needed to hone in on just us as the network designers, as the users of this map. And that we needed to take a phased approach where we were just developing a map that would reveal the regional organizations to inform the network design. So instead of looking at sort of the people and the organizations, really try to simplify it into the organizations, which this for us was sort of a, well, for me, I'll just say was like, finally, I could see, like we started to look at what the data began to look like just with the organizations, and it felt so much more approachable. But the goal then would be to eventually, over time, create another phased map that might be used for weaving the social networks. So where we might start with just an asset map right now for organizations, over time, we might build some sort of social network analysis map that integrated more of the individuals and the other stakeholders that are active. So we are now sort of honing in on just the organizations. We are looking at some of the skills and assets that came up in our, well, let me back up. We're actually, in terms of how we're labeling things, we're just looking at the formal and non-formal educators. So trying to simplify who are the types of what are the types of organizations. but we still have sort of this laundry list of skills and assets and also network roles, like whether or not they're conveners, communicators, capacity builders. So we still have a lot of information, and I guess, yeah, that kind of lays out sort of where we are, some of our struggles getting there, and then how we landed on just organizations. We don't know if this is the right process, but it feels like we can wrap our hands around it, which feels a little bit better than it felt a few weeks ago. Sonia, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is useful, but we've learned through the whole process that people were interested in both, and like a decision maker network that's kind of like working from the grass tops down, and this like practitioner network that's like working from the grassroots up. And so we're looking at these kind of layered, like the networks of networks, if you're familiar with the June Holly graphic, which there's just like a lot of complexities. And then but there's a number of like tags besides like their network role, like these kind of 4 different roles, like core, if they're interested in network leadership, convener, those things Christy just said. There's also, we've identified maybe 8 different tags that have emerged as important, like from the community and from the work group clients. So things like one of the tags is JEDI. Are they doing justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion work? Because it's they want to really make sure that that's grounded right from the beginning of the network, and that's centered right from the beginning of the development of the network, or the bolstering of these existing networks of networks. So we've identified a number of tags that are important as network designers to think about in this kind of phase 1 development. So yeah, if we had to keep whittling and whittling and whittling and whittling to try to figure out like what is the most important information for a network designer have in this kind of phase 1 development, and that's where we are right now. Also, the scale thing has been presenting some issues, which we're also addressing kind of in this. We think the best way is this phased approach. So we're even though our clients seem more interested in getting to that local, like practitioner information, like we thought that the best first phase was like really looking at this regional landscape and this regional approach. And our client is they are a regional network essentially. And then from there, maybe as a network, weavers are identified for each state, which have vastly different systems and ways of making decisions and power structures. And, one state has like 26 school districts and another has 500 districts. So like for a people-centered map, to me, it would make more sense to have a network weaver working on state level maps that are practitioner people focused, that are really about collecting that relational data. And maybe that's where then sumApp would come in at those state levels. So struggling with that kind of local, state, regional, and even national. There's even some kind of national policy that's been popping its head in here and there. So it just feels very complex.
Mm-hmm. So thanks for that, for both of you. And what I'm thinking about is how to frame the challenge that we want to present questions around. Like what feels to you like, so since we talked, I don't know, was it 2 months ago? I mean, clearly you guys have come a really long way. There were a whole lot of questions and I was like, oh my God, I'm having a heart attack with overwhelm just thinking about it, let alone anybody expecting me to say anything about it. But clearly you've come, you've talked to a lot of people and you've gotten a lot of input and you've done a lot of thinking and you've made a lot of progress. And so I'm realizing one of the challenges of using this format is always going to be, if we're planning a month ahead of time, the people who have questions today, they'll probably have many of their questions answered by the time we get to the clinic. So I need to rethink how that will work. But having said all that, what would you say, like in a sentence, is the sort of the biggest question you two are carrying right now, or the biggest challenge or unknown that would be helpful for you to discuss? Or, yeah.
Christy, is something rising to the top for you?
Go ahead. If you have something, go for it, Sonia. I mean, okay. So I think maybe it's around process and folks that have developed, I know these network maps can be messy no matter what. And essentially this group wants recommendations on how to bolster existing networks or seed new networks so that they have more formal and non-formal educators connecting in each of the states. And so we want to use this map, one, again, to inform our recommendations at this point. So I think what I'd like to know is, essentially our clients went in sort of with the same thinking we had, which was really big. And then it became really clear to us that big was just so very messy. And so, but at the same time, I have felt through this process like we are cutting back what they potentially saw as their end product. And that's just organization that's going to be a much smaller scope, but it will be helpful, I believe, in sort of network design and potentially as a pilot for getting user feedback on any future map that's created. So I guess I'm just wondering if folks have guidance on process, if the process we used makes any sense. A lot of the ways that we came up with tags was just by listening to folks. I mean, are there a certain number of tags that work better when you're looking at maps? I don't know. We are just very much in a new space. And so,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So Louis, I'm going to hold off with the looking at the map request that I just saw pop up because what I want to do now is move us into a phase of inquiry. So, the Einstein quote about if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes generating the right question and then I'd be able to solve it in 5 minutes. And probably the first time I heard that, I thought that was the stupidest thing I ever heard because I'm a jump in and solve it problem solver kind of gal. And the more I keep learning to be patient and let the questions come and just keep digging into questions, that actually magic happens. And the solution that I thought was the solution, it was not. So I want one of the things that we start to doing, I want to provide as a community practice leader, an opportunity for us to start really thinking questions about mapping. So this is one of those places. So what I want us to do is just go in and I made some, for those, I'm going to share my screen again. So for those of you who are not actually in Team Retro on your own browser, you can watch what's happening right now in it. And so some people have started to put in questions. I just made some, this is just like some high level questions because I didn't want one column because you need columns. And, I'm going to be quiet in a moment. We're going to give 5 minutes and everybody who is in there, feel free to go in and put in your questions yourselves. And if you have any, if you're not in there and you want to ask questions, I still encourage you to be questioning, put them in the chat and Kara or I or Jim or somebody will get them into the board. And I'm going to be quiet now for 5 minutes and we're going. I'm even going to put a timer on. I'm going to give us, I'll give us 4 because I've been, oops, not hours. Okay, so there's a timer. If you totally want to check out, you can see when to come back.
So I think we need more questions coming in the chat. If you're contributing that way.
And if Christy and Sonia, if you want to try logging in and be actually in there, so you're not counting on my screen, that's that would be great. There will be a, another view where we'll be able to see these a little bit better, but because
I'll try to log in again, Christina. I got, it never sent me the final passcode via email. So perhaps I put in the wrong address. So let me just try one more time.
okay, Christy, it looks like you're in. Okay. Okay, who are people getting Mary's? And I'm sorry, I lost track of. Jim, Kara, have you been putting in Mary and Stephanie and Paul's?
I don't have Stephanie's in there yet. Maybe someone else does.
Top on the right. Mary, this is everything there is. Okay, so our time is up. Stop. So if there's any in the chat that, I'm not looking at the chat, so if there's any in the chat that aren't in the Team Retro yet, whoever would get those in, that'd be great. And I just want to make a comment. It might seem so, I don't need to, but I'm going to because I feel like it. About how long I used to do these question things, and questions flood into my mind instantly. I'm a very quick thinker. And if you gave me 5 minutes, I'd be twiddling my thumbs, getting more and more like impatient. But I've also realized that if I quit being impatient and then read what other people are putting in there, actually, and I pause and quit being impatient, more bubbles up. And that's the more that bubbles up is what we're actually looking for. So that's why I gave us as long as I did. So for those of you who kept trying to come up with questions, that was, thank you for that. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next step, which is this tool is going to semantically group them. Let me just, well, I'm going to move that up. Am I sharing my screen? Yes, I am sharing my screen. So it's grouping them. Those of you who are in here, if they grouped it, well, let's just see. If the end goal, okay, that one will group because it's actually the same thing. Are there common? I'm going to ungroup that. those of you who are in here, you can actually drag and group, just drag a, we'll look up you together. So it made an attempt. I've accepted or not accepted, but you guys can make groups too. So let's try clustering all of these cards. And once you put them in a cluster, there's a little place to put in a title. And so we'll take a minute to cluster. Questions?
How do you do this clustering?
Grab a card that you think goes with another card and hover it over. So like, this is not necessarily the right one, but I'm just going to do this. So I'm adding these together. Can you see on my screen? Oh, yeah.
I'm looking at my screen, but, oh, but we only have these 3 areas to cluster it around.
Yeah. And you can cluster across too. Does that make sense? I mean, you can drag them across columns.
It's interesting how most of these just initially went into questions around purpose and intentions.
Do we think outcomes is a purpose? I'm going to drag this up.
Yeah, that's my intent. But of course, that's the challenge that Christy and Sonia brought to us all here with
Yep.
clarification around purpose. So,
Okay, I want to do a process check. Are we not clustering yet because people are still reading and absorbing the questions, or because of technical issues?
what about the answer that they're clustered appropriately?
Well, there's only 2 clusters. And I'm going to name them.
I, for one, am not clear about what you're doing, because I thought the clusters are these 3 columns.
Okay.
Questions around purpose, questions around challenge, any other questions?
No, the columns, that's just to generate, those are just question prompts to generate the questions. But then we're clustering around what is the content of the question, which questions are the same, are basically about the same topic. Whether,
But where are you clustering them? What view?
okay, how about, let's stop sharing for a second. Or no, I mean, you guys all come back to my screen, if you can do that. Jane, thank you for, Jane's reading. Hopefully she's able to process. Okay,
Oh, I see.
okay.
No, I don't actually.
So here's what let's do. This is for Christy and Sonia. And so if you two feel like you've absorbed enough of the questions and you don't need them clustered because you're able to, I mean, part of clustering is to get everybody ideas out and then sort of on the same page, but we're doing this just for you two. So if there's if you feel ready to just say, yeah, I want to really dig into this or that question or topic or fledgling cluster, feel free to jump in and just say that, and we can start having that conversation. Or I'll just shut up for another few minutes and let people proceed to cluster.
Sonia, so I'm just going to be honest, like for me, processing all these good questions and clustering them and thinking about the answers is difficult for me to do on the spot. That's something like I take a piece of paper and I like write and think through. So I'm just being honest, this is a little bit challenging for me to do in a very meaningful way. But I'm wondering, Sonia, if any are popping up for you that might be helpful to think through since you're working on the maps themselves. And we do have a couple network maps that we've started. But yeah, what do you think, Sonia?
Well, yeah, first of all, this is all just great feedback. Like, thank you all so much for like really taking the time to listen to us and think about these really wonderful questions and prompts and ideas. Like, it's definitely like, you know, got my little rat wheel spinning in my brain. I love this idea. Like, I love this, whoever talked about this central fire, like building on this, important to be clear on the central fire that unites all levels for the long term. Because yes, this is a long-term you know, this is not an outcome that's going to happen anytime soon. So like, yeah, thinking about that long game. That you, and most, you know, most big change projects are that, right? So I love this idea of thinking about this central fire that unites all levels for the long term, and then things that are uniquely important to local situations like that. That's really like, I'm really, I'd like to noodle on that. Like, I created a graphic, you know, well, first of all, I adapted, for people that had asked, I adapted June Hawley's Networks of Networks graphic to like customized for this client. Like, here's your state networks, here's you guys as the kind of like working on the policy work at this level across the region, here's the state level networks, here's the local networks and practitioners, and here's like the different network functions that would have to happen at each of those levels, right? Yeah, there's a lot of like professional development and stuff like that happening locally, and then there's just, yeah, kind of different functions that each level would play. And then there's, you know, with anything with systems change, you know, it's you have systems change that has to happen, yeah, like at that policy level, like at multiple levels, but then people implementing that change on the ground, right, too. So I'd love to think more about that central fire that unites all the levels, and then the network functions that are going to be needed to advance that systemic change. And I'm not sure, like the map, I was hoping like there was a 3-dimensional function in Kumu, because I felt like that was kind of like a function that would have been helpful for me to look at things that way. So at this point, again, like in this very, 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 very first phase, we just want to identify like where the energy is, like where is all the energy in the region, like who has what skills and assets, and then network, like strong network roles to be able to start just building something together.
Cool.
But I love this, you know, for big change, I love this idea of thinking about this central fire that's uniting all levels, and then how could that be built out? How could that be continued to visualized for people? Because I love the idea of a map for, like at this point, like at this phase, the map is really going to just help people see the network, see what's already out there, see where the energy is, see where maybe some of the who's missing that really needs to be pulled into this from the beginning. And the map, you know, will really help develop what's the network mindset and some opportunities for like strategy. I don't know if that.
No, that's actually.
At all.
Well,
I feel like I'm just blabbering.
No, thank you. That was really helpful. And actually, one of the models that I'm taking this process from and sort of mashing it with some technology is Glenda Ouyang, who's the founder of Human Systems Dynamics. Once COVID started, she had all these, you know, practitioners who had all these questions, and all their systems needed to change. And she started a thing, and she's still been doing it. She's been doing it all year, and I've been very impressed. Every day at 10 a.m., a group jumps online from her community and one person says a challenge and they spend 20 minutes just saying and putting the questions, the community's questions into the chat. So they all get in the chat, and then the person who presented the challenge doesn't answer any of those questions and they just do what you just did, which is just summarize what they heard and what was useful about those set of questions. And then they take the questions away and then they work with them. So I was sort of, so I was trying to like also give you some conversation place and that process that they do every morning at 10 o'clock is a 20-minute process. So everybody knows it. They jump online, they do it. There's a lot. I mean, it's still got people doing it every single day in that community. And so I wanted, I thought, well, we've got more than 20 minutes, so let's add some conversation. And I was trying to aim at being able to do that. But you just did their process and that worked pretty well. So I'm gonna say, this was really, really useful. I'm glad you guys I'm gonna save these questions and send them to you. We'll share them all in the.
And I'd love if you could send us the chat box too, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, Kara will make sure you get all of that. And so thank you so much for being the test case. And thank you to everyone. I'm gonna stop sharing now. Thank you to everyone who participated for inputting your questions and for sticking through this test case. I know that at some point you'll have a cool map to share with us. Then we'll have you come back with that for onboarding. And then I want to invite all of you. So I'm gonna a couple wrap up things, and then we'll be to the top of the hour and we'll say goodbye. But one of the wrap up things is to invite you as you are thinking about projects. If you can see one kind of on the horizon that you have a challenge with, to get in touch, excuse me, my throat's getting weird, to get into contact with me or Kara and get on the schedule to do, we won't do a clinic every deep dive. We'll do topics and clinics. It'll be a mix. But if you've got a good project that you really need some help with, we'd love to do this again, because I think it's really helpful for us to all think together. And Mary's asking if it would be possible to send the points we raised. And I would love it if someone were willing to do that summarizing. I'm not going to do that summarizing. But if anyone is willing to take the points and summarize them and share them with the group, Sarah and I or Kara and I would be happy to facilitate the communication around that or the distribution around that. But I don't have time to to do it myself. So, but I think it's a great idea, even though I'm not going to do it. So thank you for that, Mary. And then, so invitation to do a clinic, and also we will do the questions from Team Retro, and they'll get into Slack and into the follow-up email. And I would like, so we have a couple more minutes, and what I would like, what would be very helpful for me is for you guys to spend just a moment thinking about this process and how we could sort of get at the goals for the process and improve the process that I just walked you through. So if you have any feedback or thoughts about improving the process, I would like to just spend a minute letting you put those in the chat. And if there's a big takeaway that you got that you would like to share, we would love to see that as well. So improvements and what you got. And if you hate typing, you can say it out loud.
I saw some parallels between the complexity and scales as mentioned as challenges with the mapping and also in this clinic call. Like this is a complex map, so it's a complex conversation. And I think it's completely fine to leave it really open and wide if that is what serves best. And I think then we can use these kind of calls to just have like very wide generative questions. And then, people can take them in and process them and hopefully that's useful. But I think otherwise it's also good if somebody has a more specific, narrow focus, intention, or question of like, I want to have support with that. I think it can be more practical in a short time, but it needs to be narrow enough. So that's just something I'm picking up with, and this is parallels for me for the whole process of the mapping also that you described, Christy and Sonia, where you just need to be clear. It's not that a simpler map is not as useful. It's just different use. So I think the same goes with these kind of calls.
And I just want to add to that, like what has come clearer for me is that when we were thinking about sort of the big kahuna, we weren't putting in any time to get feedback from those that might use it. And so it was really helpful to think that, oh, well, we should narrow this focus down so that it's really just us and maybe a couple other network designers that are using this, and that it could potentially serve as a way to engage stakeholders in network maps and what their initial network map looks like, and then see how users want to interface with it so that we could design something that was better suited for engaging multiple stakeholders beyond just the network designers, to really engaging the network. So our focus on the network design is it's definitely only going to be used by a few people initially, but our hopes is that we could build on it hopefully over time so that we can create a tool that's more useful for more people.
Jim, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just on that point, Christy, I know when we tried to build a map for the Network Weavers Facebook group, we opened it wide open to get input, and we only had a few people that were really into, I mean, there were 20 or 30 people that were interested, but the idea of iteration that Christine has brought up seems really important, of just, you've got a couple people that are highly charged. What do they want to get out of it? What do you anticipate others might build something, put it out there to those stakeholders and really get good feedback, and then build another iteration and keep building that out. Seems like a good method.
So
yeah, and I will say also,
Christy,
Sarah,
I'm going to pause here. Sorry. We're at the top of the hour, so I just want to honor everybody's time and say so we'll stick around so we can continue this conversation. But for those of you who have to go, what we're going to do is we're going to do our closing ritual, which is we'll all unmute ourselves. I'll count down, and then we'll all just give each other our blessings and greetings for the day. And those of you who need to go can pop off. And then if you want to stay, and we'll continue the conversation. And Christy will pick up where I just interrupted you. So everybody ready to unmute and say goodbye? Don't have to. It's not a command, but it's an invitation. Okay. So
Thank you.
3, 2, 1, bye. Have a
Bye.
wonderful
Bye. Thank you,
day.
everybody. Have a great day.
Bless you
Wonderful.
all. Bye. Okay.
I just wanted to say Sarah Shanahan from Reamp has been really helpful and mentioned the same thing, Jim, about they've been working on their map. They have a pilot, they have a group, a small circle that works with them as they think through. Anyway, that's sort of the input from groups like you all and from Sarah, people that have experience doing this, is so valuable to us. We really appreciate it.
Christy, I wondered if it seems to me that you already know quite a lot, and that it would be possible, even using a sketch map, to share the 4 levels with people. Because what I find, because almost all my projects end up with 4 or 5 levels, each level wants slightly different information, and none of them know that about each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so helping people, I mean, this is a work in progress. I don't pretend that I have any clear answers in a checklist step form, but just even helping people to appreciate that, that at the federal level, it isn't that they don't care about the local level. It's just that they're preoccupied with other things. And that getting that sort of compassion almost for where your part is critical, and it is your part. It's not everybody's part.
Yeah,
Um,
that's so sage. That's sage advice. Yeah.
and so I do agree with you about it would be great to have a third dimensional. I keep having a picture in my head of like an acrylic house that's got several floors that I could cart around with me and show people. But failing that, even kind of like a really brief sketch, so don't even try and use a technology one. Don't jump to the detail. To show the shape of the whole might be
Great advice. Yeah,
I
think you're
actually
exactly
do have
right.
a layered diagram I'd be happy to share right now if people want to see it, want to see it from June
Wow.
Holly's work. Would
Wow.
people be interested in me showing that quickly? Okay.
I would.
Awesome. So here is what, June had created, and then I took it and kind of took a stab at adapting some of these functions that are happening at each level.
So the local networks start on the right-hand side of it, and then if you go counterclockwise, it moves from local to state and then up to the regional level. And Sonia included some of the offerings that happen, like you were saying, Sharon. Things happen. Organizations provide different things at different levels. So Sonia put down some of the offerings, if you will, that happen at each of those levels.
And so somebody one of the questions somebody had, I was trying to describe it in what I thought was much the same way, but they did it better. This sort of rapid prototyping, and I think will allow you to, well, I would hope it will depend on the players, of course. But if they can see that their need will come, or you've got somebody who would do a prototype of what it might look like, so that the local level could practice what a social map might look like. And so they can start to get ready, rather than thinking of this project as a series of sequence steps, like is so commonly what we've been trained to think of it.
Yeah. Well, and that there might be an opportunity to do it. I think I'm hearing you say, Sharon, because we will present our recommendations to whomever is interested in hearing them, but hopefully folks that are interested in advancing the network potential. And so maybe we can use some, really, like, I was just so struck by Sarah's maps that were developed for REAMP and the way that they've been helpful in them designing their work. And then also very struck by sumApp's this group's map, and like being able to connect to skills and offer skills, and that sort of, anyway, I think that's really good advice of using maybe not even our data, but other data to say this is what it could potentially look like.
Yeah, good point. That's even better. Like one of the things that I'm beginning to appreciate is communities are so used to being ignored that they bail quickly. They decide, oh, this is just going to be another one of those. And so I'm learning that I have to relearn my prioritization, because I come to the same place as you do, that, well, this will make it way easier. I mean, if we're confused, how good can that be for everybody else? But if I don't signal very early that the community needs is going to be addressed, then they just bail. And I can't get them back then. Yeah. So that was another piece of my thinking.
Thank you.
Well, and so this raises a question for me. Do the three networks view themselves as a learning partnership, or are they thinking of it as just a network, a chance to get to know somebody and get their business card? I mean, what is actually the community? I mean, in Native Wisdoms, they understand that community is a process. It is not a noun. So community is the process of sharing both wisdom and responsibility. So when people turn off, like you're saying, Sharon, they think this is something to be served up to them without taking any responsibility for making it work. And so, you know, Peter Block decades ago said, why are you going around the room asking people, what are you going to do for them today? Turn that around and say, how much are you going to contribute to my own learning? You know, that was a huge aha for me. And I feel like we do that over and over and over, instead of helping them see that they have a chance to be learning partners, but that requires effort and exchange in a way that they're not used to. So the question of how do they view themselves and their identity, is it meant to be transactional? Is it? But I have found when I work with clients and I put them in learning partnerships that sharing your learning edges with people is harder than I would have thought, even for very strong, intact groups.
Yeah.
So we had to come up with a process where they knew exactly what the process was. People would explain, here's what I'm trying to do, here's my beliefs about it, here's my intention, here's where I'm stuck. And when their colleagues walked around that with them and gave feedback, the rule was the person who was there in the middle getting the consult got to be totally quiet and simply listen to people's ideas about their project without having to have a response or back and forth. You were just trying to, the Quakers call this a clearing committee. And it is so powerful to have a whole group of people looking at your issues, but you're not going to have to do a dog and pony show to say, oh, I like this, I don't like that, or you're crazy about that. But this is more complicated, but you all said it earlier, you're on the right track. It's all about the energy. It's all about the energy. But once you generate that energy, you have to show them you have a pathway that they can trust. Because when it gets slow, when people go, is anything happening? You know, we've all been part of processes that peter out. And so I always tell people your response is rational. So what are we going to do to make sure it doesn't peter out? How are we all going to hold an intention to keep it going? Because it's important enough to us. And frankly, our little planet isn't going to make it if we don't get faster at learning and learning how to learn.
Yep.
That's the only game in town. So that's what you all have the opportunity. It's like when IBM first created their global learning communities, the way that the senior management were finally able to understand it is that it was worth the time and effort because it reduced the cycle time to innovation for their engineers.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do, reduce the cycle time for social innovations on the ground, giving people the tools they need. And I know of no better way of doing it through sumApp, because when I'm ready for a project, I can do it at 3 a.m. I can go in there and find a likely partner. But because people have never seen this before, I've been through this with my local community, it's hard for people to imagine. So there's this real marathon effect because we can all imagine it, right? But most people cannot.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're all learning this together. What's the fastest way for people to be able to see the benefits early?
Yeah. Thanks for that, Stephanie.
I love that. Oh, sorry. Community is a process. Thank you for that, Stephanie. That's really great.
Yeah.
I'll put that on here.
Yeah, really great.
And Jim, looks like posted a book, Peter Block, Community, The Structure of Belonging. Yeah, that looks right up my alley. I'm going to check that out. Thank you.
So I'm wondering if there are people we haven't
And
heard.
I just want to say something, which is, I just want to say our clients are like they're behind us 100%. Like I you know, they did want the big, but now that we've explained the small, they're very supportive. They are fantastic. And you don't even know who they are, but I just want to say they're in with us in the process.
And they meet with us every other week. So it's been like all of us noodling and, you know, figuring things out together, which has been really incredible process.
Cool. I'm wondering if there's anyone who hasn't spoken much or at all has questions or thoughts or wants to move in another direction or just want to open it up to make sure everybody has a chance.
I have one short thing to say, and then I think I'll have to leave also, which is I also put a question like that into the Team Retro space around kind of systems change and leverage points, because that's one thing that I like over and over come back again, where I'm like, okay, purpose, intention, that's all nice, but if there is some larger sense of we want to change a system, and this is what it sounds like from everything you shared, you know, they don't just want to offer a bit of ecological education, they want to change the whole system so the students have that kind of eco-literacy. So then for me, it's not just like part of the learning process, I think, is figuring out what are leverage points in the system to achieve that change. And just asking people for their needs or intentions might not lead to the same kind of leverage points, because they might not know that. And they have very, you know, wholehearted, dear, great intentions that are based on their current reality, but not based on the potential. So I think this is also like, how much are we focusing on what is already there, and how much are we building something to achieve a potential that's not existing yet, that people might not know or be able to describe or see a clear path towards, right? So that's just something that was at the top of my mind. And I think it's, yeah, I think there's not an answer to it, but it's a piece of the process as well. And I think especially for any network that has that kind of ambition or scale to it of systems change, it's really worth keeping in mind and trying to, you know, in iterations kind of work on it and not forget. Yeah, that's
You're right on point there. Absolutely. Thank you.
I really appreciate that comment, Laura. I mean, it's really meaningful. I feel like you just crystallized a thing I'm always struggling with, which is, yeah, you just said it. I won't repeat it, but that was great. And thank you. And if you're jumping off, have a good day, evening. Love
Thank
you.
you.
Bye. Anyone else? Paul.
I just had a brief question, and it might already have been answered, so apologies if it has. It's been fascinating to just listen along to the call. I was just wondering how. So the purpose of the map is to connect people so that to increase environmental literacy. Is that essentially?
Yes, originally, and now that's kind of the long-term purpose. And we're going to, the short term is how can we use what we know, which is limited, right? What we know to design, to give recommendations about designing or enhancing the networks that exist.
Sure. Okay, cool. So my question was just, how are the people, I guess maybe it'd be the practitioners or the people that would be involved in teaching or talking about environmental literacy, what's their involvement in the design of the map or design of the networking, or in this process? Like, what's their involvement? I'm sorry if it's already been asked.
No. I was just looking at Sonia. I'm always jumping in for Sonia. Do you want to answer it?
Sure. So the practitioners on the ground, so there are both these, like, kind of the folks on the ground are the formal and non-formal, like, practitioners on the ground. And that's who you're asking about, them, right? Those people on the ground. Yep. So we did about 42 so altogether between our interviews and our focus groups, we've talked to about 42 people who have also kind of made recommendations about kind of their networks also. So there's been a small sample in that small sample. There are even more smaller samples of both formal and non-formal educators who have spent, who spent quite a bit of time talking with us about their specific, kind of what's happening in their specific worlds, which is very different from one state to another, and the resources and the structures and the funding but at the end of the day, what we're hearing is that, there aren't enough resources. It's just not, it's not a focus, it's not tied in often to the standards of learning. So it is a major challenge right now. There's one state that has kind of made the most progress because they got top-down support, and it's a graduation requirement, and it's been integrated at a systemic level so that the teachers have to do it. It's not an addition to it, it's already there. So that what we're hearing is, like, you can't just dump another thing on teachers. There's not the capacity, there's not the resources. it's too much, you know, teachers are already being asked to do too much. So that's kind of been in our small sample, those are the main things we've been hearing from them. Christy, anything to add to that?
The only thing to say is we know this is a limited view. Like this is not comprehensive at all. To be comprehensive would be tens of thousands of people probably in the map. But this is the information that we've been able to glean from starting with the leadership group that hired us, to those that they recommended we talk to those that they saw as part of their network. So we've got, but it's also, you know, just based on sort of, again, the 42 people that we connected with plus our leadership group.
And like one of the tags we're using to try to like get at where it's working on the ground for practitioners, we're using a tag called standout case story to like help us see kind of where around the region it's working. So, and if there's potential for scaling and kind of what's worked about that project or that school district. So that's how we're tagging that, and hopefully can gather more too.
That's fascinating. Thank you.
Is it? I don't know what I'm doing really. It is all fascinating. It's been a fascinating process for sure. Go ahead, Sharon.
This is a content point rather than a process point. So forgive me for this, but I'm finding over and over, and now have gotten to a place of just your point about resources and teachers don't have enough time or whatever, to look at it from a complexity view about what things in the system are a structural issue. And so the structural issue I have come up with, which might apply to you, is that we have systems which are focused on specialization. And so we have 1 billion and growing tiny little content pieces like environmental literacy, coding. It doesn't matter which part of the system you're in or which part of the society you're in, everybody's got their idea that if you only taught this in school. And so we've got a structural problem, like a math problem of this specialization. So could they attach environmental literacy to something else?
Across disciplines is what they're saying. Yep.
Or across content area.
Yep.
Like, can you attach it to math, or can you attach it to whatever? And so
that's one of the recommendations. Yep, absolutely.
Perfect.
because that's the only there. So the focus is so much on reading and math everywhere. Reading and math. So there's no reason though why you can't integrate environmentalism with all these things together, and that's what we're finding from all the standout case stories.
Thank you. Well, good luck with it. My groups aren't that far, so.
It's really interesting doing this project. I was just going to say during COVID too. It's been a whole other, layer. Mary, did you want to say something?
Oh, I just in working with environmental educators. I think it always seems very intellectual, and so personally, I have a hard time with that. But I met someone who, with the Institute for Humane Education, that uses a solutionary approach where the students are sort of made aware of the issues in the world, but asked or start from what they feel most passionate about, and then move from there to do projects. So I could see where this map would really be handy with a different type of education, or beyond what are the assumptions related to environmental literacy to be very useful. So
Mhm.
I'm just wondering how they define environmental literacy and more around opening up that to something that's more effective than what I often hear. Yeah.
Right.
That's a good point.
Absolutely.
Another sort of on the ground example was a school district here in the Bay Area where the 5 or 6 environmental organizations looked at what part of the curriculum they could contribute. So they offered the teachers the sort of menu that covered the whole year. They created a menu that made it very easy for teachers to just sign up
Yep.
for what they wanted in terms of the program that went along with their curriculum, and it was all mapped out for them. So I could see where that would be another possible use for the map on a local level.
Yes. Yeah, that connection we're finding between the formal educators and the non-formal educators at that local level is huge. Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, that would be incredible for state level maps for people to be able to dig into their local resources that are in there that they don't know about, that are all around them.
Sarah Shanahan, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts. I just want to say how much I appreciate Sarah's talking with people in our network and just your insights. And so I was just wondering what's in your head at the moment.
I've just been doing a lot of listening. Like, as you know, I've already had a conversation with Sonia and Christy about this. And we have identified maybe a couple opportunities where we're going to continue to collaborate. Cool. So I really wanted to join today to just do some more deep listening, kind of hear reflections from other people. So I don't really have much to contribute, and that's part of the reason I've just been stepping back and absorbing.
Sarah's been wonderful.
I have a question. Can you guys recommend, so some of the questions we have right now outside of the process are around technical things. Do you have recommendations of good way, even just like as an example, one of the original maps Sonia made had people in it. So it had person as a label, and now we've taken out all the people. Like, who would you recommend connecting with to get guidance on how to get that label out of our map? Even though it's not there in the spreadsheet anymore, it's still showing up on our map. That's just an example. Like, who has that sort of technical guidance that you all have used that we could maybe reach out to?
So are you talking about, generally that's what Slack is great for, because, when you run into a technical thing, like how to remove that label, you want it now, and you don't want to wait 2 months to get an appointment with somebody who's an expert, but there are people in Slack, and that's Kara and Tim often can handle those kinds of questions, or I can handle them. But so really for quick, bitty, like those granular technical stuff, Slack is the best place. If we're, if it's more like I have a process I want to think through, or it's a bigger chunk of thinking, then my office hours is good. But I just advise using Slack because there are people in there will respond relatively quickly, and if it's a thing that you can break down into a few sentences, that's the place for it, because it doesn't.
And that's the sumApp Slack, not the Kumu Slack community, but the sumApp.
Right. So sometimes you will not know, is this actually a sumApp? So if you're using sumApp for your map, then I would say the place to start is in the sumApp Slack. If you're not using sumApp, if it's a Kumu map and it's not actually pulling data from sumApp, then I would go straight to Kumu. But sometimes you won't know, is this a Kumu issue or is it a sumApp issue? But if you're using both, start with us. And if we don't have control over that piece of it, we'll let you know and sort of give you some guidance on, or, you know, at least give you some keywords that they use or whatever to go into Kumu.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Anything else burning for anyone or summary? Mr. Jim?
I just wanted to express appreciation for the conversation. It's really rich.
It's great. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you guys for being both guinea pigs and sharing your process so fully and coming with such a big one. I mean, it was really juicy. Thank you for that.
The opportunity. It's great to be able to connect with you all. Hey, AJ.
Okay.
Christine, thanks for organizing this. I again, very much value what you're doing.
Yeah, we all do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
So, are we good? Should we do our bye-bye and go on with our days and evenings? So thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
It's such a great pleasure. Oh, unmute. 3, 2, 1.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.